Are we living in the last days? Is time running out for the human race? Certainly we have to say that things are not going too well for the human race at this present time. There's a veteran philosopher and political activist called Noam Chomsky, and he wrote in The Spectator magazine last year, "We're approaching the most dangerous point in human history. We're now facing the prospect of destruction of organized human life on Earth." Was he overstating it, or is it actually a possibility? If you look around, there are multiple crises hitting the world at this present time. You've got war, bad government, poverty, violence, brought some nations to the brink of collapse. Millions of refugees being sent around the world looking for a better place to live in. Middle East is constantly in focus and always part of the focus for events. You've got extreme heat, droughts, floods, and very cold weather in some places. Global food production, distribution of food is in decline. UN is warning that coming famine could result in up to 1 billion people being starved. Got family life and moral values under attack. You've got confusion over sex and gender, confusion over what marriage is even. And if you believe that marriage is just between a man and a woman, you'll find that some people, even in the church, don't agree with you. And we have also an assault on our youth with children being told that there are many genders and they can change sex if they like. And at the same time, you've got a growing financial crisis around the world. Prices rising, shortage of supplies. Many countries, people are crushed by poverty, and they don't really have a way out of that. And if you look in the developed countries like ours, you find that the economies are all massively in debt, both public debt and private debt, which probably they will never be able to pay back. Economists warning about inflation, economic crisis, and just this last couple of days, we've seen the collapse of a bank, and questions are this going to carry on and threaten people's financial security? A lot of people in the financial world talking about changing the system for money and going away from cash and checks and normal bank accounts to what they call central bank digital currencies. Tell you a bit more about that later on. Now you can read about this all the time in the newspapers, but there's one piece of information they don't tell you, that all these things line up with Bible prophecies and things which are said to happen in the last days. Here's just a few examples. It says in the Bible there's going to be an increase in wars, famines, plagues, and earthquakes. Luke 21. The earth is going to be filled with violence and immorality. Many people are going to be afraid of what's going to happen. Luke 17. And there's going to be lawlessness abounding. And Matthew 24 tells you something about that. Be widespread pollution of the earth and destruction of the environment. You can read about that in Isaiah 24, Revelation chapter 8. There'll be a situation in Israel, in the Middle East, concerning Israel and Jerusalem, which will bring about the last war before Jesus returns. And at the same time, you're going to see a globalization process backed by high-tech developments in an attempt to bring about a global government controlling the world. And you're going to see also an attack on the Bible from all sides, both from within so-called Christians and from outside in the world. Despite this, the message of the gospel is going to reach all nations despite opposition and persecution. Do you see any of those things happening? You see all of them happening? One of the interesting things about our time is that all these things are converging. People say, well, there have always been wars and troubles. Yes, there have been. But what we're seeing today is that the specific prophecies of the Bible are all converging in one time, and that's our time. Now, a lot of skeptics mock the idea. They say, we've heard all this before. So Christians have told us that Jesus is coming back again and nothing happens, so we really don't believe it. Well, that's even prophesied in the Bible as well. 2 Peter chapter 3, it says, above all, you must understand that in the last days scoffers will come, scoffing and following their own desires. They will say, where is this coming? He promised, ever since our ancestors died, everything goes on as it has since the beginning of creation. So will everything go on as it has, or will there be a sudden intervention of God? If you take the Bible literally, then you have to believe that there's going to be a time when God is going to intervene very dramatically in the affairs of this planet. That it'll be actually the biggest intervention of God you've had since creation. and it's going to bring about a radical change in the way the world is run. Going to be actually run by Jesus when he comes back, which will be better. And all these things are happening now. It's never happened before in history that these things have come together in the way they are now. And you've got a whole lot of details in the Gospels, in Matthew 24, Mark 13, Luke 21, the so-called Olivet Discourse, in parts of the Old Testament and the Hebrew prophets, and also above all in the book of Revelation, chapters 6 through to 19, which detail the events that are going to happen in the last days before Jesus comes again. When you study all these prophecies and you compare them with what's happening in the world today, you can see that there is a coming together of the two. And as I say, it hasn't happened before in history, never. That makes us a kind of interesting generation, I think. And in the Bible, these processes also compared to the pains of a woman in labor. And one of the things which I often say is that when a woman goes into labor, she experiences a series of shocks, which are contractions, which become more intense the nearer she gets to the birth of the child. And also, once the process has begun, it can't be reversed until it's completed. So when you see a series of shocks, a series of events taking place which become more intense, and those events are kind of connected, and they can't be reversed, then you're seeing the things which are leading up to the second coming of Jesus. Second coming of Jesus, as I say, will be the greatest intervention of God into history. He's coming back this time not as the suffering servant as he came the first time, not coming back this time to suffer and to die. He's coming back this time with all the power of God at his disposal to rule and to reign. Someone once said to me, if Jesus comes back again, they'll do to him what they did the first time. Told him they won't have that option. When he came the first time, he voluntarily laid aside his glory that he might suffer and die for our sins and take the punishment that we deserve on the cross and rise again from the dead in order to redeem us. When he comes the second time, he's coming back with all the power of God at his disposal to judge the world in righteousness.